The most ambitious and overachieving people don't burn out because they work hard. They burn out because they don't know how to rest strategically. Traditional advice says rest physically, emotionally, mentally to recover from burnout. But resting alone is never enough. There is a missing link that's not quite covered in traditional advice. In this video, I'll talk about burnout, how it impacts us, and that missing link that makes resting an effective strategy to overcome burnout. So how do psychologists define burnout? Burnout can be described as a combination of three sets of symptoms. One is exhaustion. It could be physical exhaustion, mental exhaustion, emotional exhaustion. When you feel drained, you don't have energy for anything. The second set of symptoms is related to negative attitudes. This might be cynical approach to life, disconnection from things, feeling apathy. So it is a negative take on life. The third set of symptoms is related to efficacy, and specifically perceived lack of efficacy or lack of accomplishment. Combined together, this triad makes up burnout. But burnout is not a subjective phenomenon. There are several physical markers that indicate burnout. This could be low-grade inflammation, also changes in certain neurotransmitters, for example, elevated levels of glutamate also serve as an indicator of burnout. Here is a little bit of background on how psychologists got interested in studying burnout. The term burnout was introduced in psychology by an American psychologist, Herbert Freudenberger, who used this term to describe his own experience. He worked very long hours from 8 a.m. till 2 a.m. over an extended period of time. So that is 18 hours each day. And then he found himself one day when he was about to go on holiday that he was just unable to get out of bed. And he spent 3 days sleeping, just unable to get up and do anything. He used the term burnout to describe what he experienced. The term burnout had long been used before to describe experiences of volunteers in New York homeless shelters, where volunteers would experience extreme fatigue, sense of disconnection, sense of professional inefficacy, all those symptoms that we now know as burnout. In modern psychology, burnout is a well documented and studied phenomenon, and we have a better understanding of what causes burnout and how it impacts people. How does burnout impact our brain? It impacts our brain in two major ways. One, it disrupts communication between different parts of the brain. For example, amygdala, emotional part of the brain, and parts of the brain such as prefrontal cortex that are responsible for judgment and decision making. So emotions and cognitive assessments are misaligned. Second impact is disruption to executive functions. Executive functions during burnout are somewhat impaired. Executive functions are cognitive processes that oversee how brain operates as a whole. So you can think of executive functions as a control center for the brain. Executive functions do many different things, but very broadly we can divide them into 5 areas that they are responsible for. Executive functions include self-management of time, that is planning and prioritizing tasks. Second is self-organization and problem solving, that is solving problems strategically, organizing, planning step-by-step behavior, finding solutions. Third is self-restraint, that is being able to control your behavior, being able to swap short-term rewards for long-term benefits, that is being able to follow principles of delayed gratification. Fourth, that executive functions oversee is self-motivation, that is working towards your goals, being able to execute goal-directed behavior. And the fifth area is self-management of emotions, being able to control your emotions, how you express them, managing emotions. Although executive functions are impaired during burnout, we know that they can be restored to their full capacity when we overcome burnout. And in fact, we can use this exact knowledge about executive functions and how they are disrupted during burnout to overcome burnout. What does that look like? What can we do? We can embed activities that draw on executive functions as part of our strategic rest and recovery. So instead of just resting, doing nothing, taking a break, thinking of rest as inactivity, think of rest as active recovery. And the type of recovery that draws on executive function is a psychological state known as flow. This is the kind of state that in everyday language we call being in the zone. When you are really absorbed in doing something that you really enjoy, something that you find challenging, but at the same time you find it rewarding because you get to use your skills, you get to use your strengths. That is exactly the state of flow. You lose sense of time, but you are locked in, you are in the zone, you are experiencing that flow. Psychologists call it peak performance or flow. And research suggests that flow draws on executive functions. It awakens our executive functions. We are using rest as a cognitive integration strategy. If we think of rest as a strategic recovery tool and we think of incorporating flow-based activities as part of our recovery, then we are leveraging the power of flow to enhance our executive functions and overcome burnout. So if we try to incorporate flow-based activities in our rest and recovery, we stand a good chance of restoring our executive functions to former glory. Give this a try. Think of an activity that you enjoy, something you find challenging, something that at the same time draws on your skills and strengths, whether this is music, art, sports, anything that allows you to find a rewarding experience and apply your skills, incorporate that in your recovery, and you will see how it impacts your overall well-being and gradually leads to the restoration of executive functions and eventually helps you overcome burnout. By getting into the state of flow, a psychological state that enhances executive functions, we are using rest strategically. We are using rest as a recovery tool.